Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Cynthia and today's video is a really special one. It is the Dust to Roses design team project that we're going to be creating. It will be a new journal. So I just wanted to start by showing you the journal that I'm currently working in. I'm done my fall journal and I really needed this new journal. It just feels like such a breath of fresh air, and I'm really in love with the results of this journal. So I'm just showing you here some of the stitching that I've done and how I've combined some different fabrics and trims to create this cover. And I did just a bit of a different closure. I'm experimenting a little bit with closures and just trying to figure out what I like most. And this is a little bit of a first time just playing around with these different types of fabrics. What we're going to be creating today is very similar in a way, of course very different because it will be different fabrics. But I think of those two journals a little bit as sisters, and they have different things to offer, but are very much along the same wave of creativity. So I'm just showing you a little bit of the different colors that I've used in here. I used a lot less printables and full pages of from books. I just kept everything very kind of just light and airy, I guess, yeah. And that's really what I want to recreate as well with our project today. But I just feel like I'm really starting to find my style a lot more in my creation of journals. I feel like I've kind of figured out my style in terms of creations in my spreads, but journal-wise, I'm still looking. So these are the fabrics that we are using today. I really love the way this journal turned out as well. So I'm just showing you a little bit of the different fabrics here. The main inspiration in the fabric section of the journal was that beautiful piece of lace, the blue lace with the flowers. It just had so much to offer, and it was part of the design team mail that we got in for the last few months. And so I just really wanted to play around with how that particular piece would interact both on the front cover but also on the inside of the cover. It has such a beautiful textile element to it with the little bits and pieces kind of dangling. And then I really wanted to use that little doily as well, which at this point I didn't know how or where I was going to be using it, but just wait till you see what I did. These are some of the printables that kind of sparked the creativity for this particular journal. They are part of one of the newer kits that Dust to Roses has available on her Etsy shop. I am super in love with this particular paper. It's part of the dark romance kit. It has beautiful flowers on it. And then, oh my goodness, this particular receipt, it has green ink on it. Green is my absolute favorite color. I just want to use this particular piece of paper over and over again. But I find that these printables, so essentially vintage papers or vintage receipt printables are my favorite kinds of printables to use because I'm able to really create on top of them, use them as collaging elements too, but I really just love using them as full pages in my journals because I'm not afraid to cover those pages particularly. They're not so busy that I feel like they're the main focus. They're just a really great add-on and they add depth to my pages. I really wanted to talk a little bit about my journey with finding my style in terms of journal creating. And so I wanted to take you down memory lane a little bit. Like I said, this journal here, so the one I'm using now, I really feel like I'm starting to find my style in terms of creating journals. And then again, with this one that we're creating today, I feel like I'm getting there, but it wasn't always the case. And I think it's important to take a look at where you come from and how your style can really evolve and what you need to try, I guess. So this is my very, very first junk journal. And this particular journal is so special to me. It was really a fluke. I ended up on Hannah's YouTube channel, and I know she's inspired so many of us to create. And for me, it was just the very first time that it was like a aha moment, because all of a sudden, all these things I had been collecting all my life, these little bits of papers, random cards, really life ephemera, and I had no idea where to put them. And I noticed that I was starting to forget some of the memories that were attached to these, and I knew I had to write down, but I didn't know how to do this. And this was just the perfect answer. So this journal I created from scratch. I used a cereal box and I covered it with a really pretty wrapping paper that I found in a local shop. It was the very first time I binded a book. It was a first for everything. I won't show you too much of the inside, as of course it's very personal. This essentially gathers all my memories from my childhood and my teenage years. So I don't want to be sharing too much, but even from the couple pages I'll show you, you can see this journal wasn't meant to be particularly like a piece of art or anything like that. It was really a way to gather my memories. And there was so many issues with the actual spine. Like it's very, it's not poorly done. It's very solid, but attractive is not how I would describe it. I was playing around with flip outs and using washi tape for the first time, and just really having fun creating different things with different bits and pieces from my life. I mean, I have so many drawings from children I babysat and pages from agendas, because I'm from the era of agendas at school. I don't think they have agendas anymore. They must not. So yeah, here, for example, these are the kind of things that I kept. This was from a class in high school that we wrote nice things about all our classmates, and I kept that, so I have all these pretty things that some of my classmates had said about me, and I just think it's so special to have a place to gather all these things. I decided I wanted to keep all, so many tickets, movie tickets and shows, and there's just so many things. Halloween costumes, and just a ton of cards as well that I held on to, some of the special cards from important people in my life. So this was my very first book. As I said, it really wasn't perfect. I don't do such big signatures anymore. I also really don't use scrapbook papers as much as I did then. You can see here, I even kept, oh my goodness, I kept a ton of bus passes. But you can see, my paper doesn't touch itself. It's not perfect, but it was a starting point, because that's what made me want to journal and made me want to start gathering even more. So the next journal that I created, again, I created from scratch. It's completely different. I used fabric for the first time, and this one I didn't like the cover that I created because it ended up warping with the glue that I was using, and that was an experience, a learning experience for me. But I'm starting to play around a little bit more with a creative aspect to actually starting to do spreads. And this journal is a lot about me. There's a ton of pictures in here, which if you've watched some of my process videos, I don't use many pictures in my journals anymore. But I talked a ton about myself in there, and I think that's still very special. And there's a few empty pages in there that I might revisit and remove from there so that I can use those pages in new journals. But again, my style has evolved so much, and I was just starting to discover that you could do art journaling and discover that there could be a lot more of a creative process to how I was gathering this information. So this was a starting point for my personal journaling, and then I moved into my next journal, which was the first time I created a journal using a real book. And again, you can still see a ton of Johanna's influence on me, but I think it's okay to use other creators' ideas, try them for yourself, see if you like them, and then you go from there, right? Because obviously, like, I didn't copy exactly what she did. I didn't use the images she used, but I mean, she has tutorials for a reason, right? Like, it's okay to try these things. And so you can see here, I did a pocket cover, or window cover, I mean, and that is very much one of her tutorials. And I had so much fun creating this journal. I started tea dyeing papers for the very first time, and I also, but then I'm still using a lot of scrapbook papers, which I don't use anymore. And, you know, that's all just kind of a learning process. And because I was discovering journaling, I was journaling so much, I felt like I had been missing out on this creative outlet, and that I hadn't been able to be creative in my life at all for the past like 10 years. So anyway, here I used a real book. I painted it. I added a piece of like a thick cardboard at the front to create the pocket, and I'm just experimenting with more fabrics for the first time, and you can really start getting a sense of my journaling style as well. But in terms of the cover, there's still a lot of detailing that's missing from it. If you're curious to see some of my process videos in this journal, I have a ton on my Instagram. In my IGTV, you can find a flip through of this completed journal, as well as a ton of Journal With Me videos. But I mean, it's really interesting for me to see how different my creations are now. But if I focus on the actual cover, even just looking right now, you can see I did nothing to the inside of the book really. The piece of fabric I used wasn't even big enough to cover the inside, and you know, I was really just playing around. So then it brings me to this journal, which I have a flip through on this channel, and this was the first time I had covered the inside of the journal with dictionary book pages, and I've been doing that ever since because I just really love the look of that. But again, I kept this one so simple. I did nothing to the outside. I loved the green color, but still, I did nothing to the outside. It was mainly, I was focusing on finding my personal style while journaling. So now this late summer journal, I put a little bit more thought into the outside of the journal, and I started stitching, which I had never done before, and that was really exciting. It was a moment of discovery. It kind of piqued my interest. And in that journal, I used some of Dusty Rose's printables. It was so much fun, and ever since I've been using more printables. So from there, of course, is my fall journal, which you've seen, and that was the first time I used fabrics to cover a journal fully, and how I fully stitched fabrics onto it. Now, this particular journal, I really got stuck creatively, and the color palette I had chose for myself didn't end up really piquing my creativity, and I used a lot of pages like this one, which I found super pretty, but I didn't, when came the time to use them in my journaling, I felt so stuck and unable to, not really knowing and not wanting to cover them fully, but just really struggling to create with the pages I had selected for myself, which again, that's a learning experience. You know, try and put different pages in your journal and see how you like interacting with them. There was a few other types of pages that I added in there. Again, they were just a little bit too busy, such as like the one on the right here. I just didn't know, I didn't want to cover it. I found it pretty, but then I didn't want to use it, and I don't know. It just didn't feel right. And then this one here, I loved the images of these girls, but I kind of lacked a way of using them properly within my journaling. So, of course, in the next journals that I'm creating now, I'm not going to be using these sorts of papers. I may revisit down the road, but at this time, it feels like they don't work for me. So, of course, playing around with fabrics inspired me to create even more, which brought me to this journal here. I was a lot more daring with this journal with my fabrics. I hand stitched the different fabrics together, which I hadn't done before. With this particular one, I only hand stitched the outside, like the one piece of fabric, or the two pieces of fabric and the one doily. Whereas with this one, there was a lot more a complex feel to it, I guess. So we can get started now in creating our journal for this project. As I said, these were the first pages I wanted to kind of base my selection of pages for my signatures with. I'm going to start by simply trimming these pages. They are printable, so I still have, I typically use my paper cutter, but I don't know if it's just me, but I always end up leaving a little bit of white on there, unfortunately. So I'm just going to trim those first. Now that I've trimmed all my papers, I've added a couple more prints that I really like that I thought I might want to use. And to these, I'm going to be adding some dyed papers. So I have beautiful cabbage dyed papers from Chantal from Red Page Cafe. So I really want to use some of these. And I'm also going to be adding some tea and coffee stained papers that I've done myself, as well as some avocado dyed papers. I did want to use some pinks in here so that it would be again a little bit different than the journal I'm currently working in. I find that if I make my journal if I'm working in a journal, if the next journal I make is too similar, then I'll just be stuck creatively as well. So I'm just picking out some different pages and trying to select a variety of papers. Just a trick, I don't know if you guys have experienced with a lot of different papers, but I love dyeing doodle paper. So you'll see in there, I have a couple pages, I'll try and point them out, but they are like a thinner, or I guess not as wide, slimmer maybe, I don't know. They're just a different paper, and it's pretty long, but it's not as wide. And you can find some full pages as well of doodle paper, but doodle paper takes it takes really well to coffee. To tea and avocado, you just have to leave it in a little bit longer. But oh my goodness, the texture, I just absolutely love the texture once it's been dyed. So if you haven't tried it yet, I absolutely encourage you to use some doodle paper. And by doodle paper, I mean like you go to the dollar store, get those doodle pads for children, and that's what I use. So here I'm just really showing you the process of each of my signatures. So each signature is going to have probably a couple printables. It's going to have some tea stained, some cabbage stained, and some avocado. So not all signature will have all of them, but I'm just trying to pick different elements. I always focus on having different sizes of papers and as much as I can different feel or texture to the papers, which is something I really like about printables because I get them sourced out, printed out. It's always like I do it on the recycled papers because it's not quite as glossy, but it is like a bit of a silkier feel to them. And I just love that contrast against the dyed papers. So I'm just gonna let you enjoy watching my little process here, and I'll try and point out, I think that was a doodle paper actually, but you will see there's a couple that are kind of thinner, and I really just absolutely love doodle paper. Alright, so now that I've kind of created my signatures or selected the papers, I'm just going to be folding all of them. I typically alternate when I fold my printables because I only print them on one side. I alternate folding them one way or the other so that as much as I can, I avoid having two pieces of white paper kind of right next to each other. And just playing around, making sure that I like the way that the pages are going to be laying together. With the music sheets and some of the doodle papers, they're too long, so I either like to trim them or I'll fold them in different ways to create little tucks or pockets, such as right here. And I'm just moving things around here so that you can have a better look. But typically I'll put everything together and then I'll flip through. I'll create all my signatures, kind of flip through them and see if there's anything I need to change. Especially when I go to right before binding the journal, when I assemble the order of each signature, that's when I find that things will move around a little bit because I don't, I just want things to flow really well. So sometimes that just requires a couple pages moving. So here, this is one of the papers that I had to, at first I thought I was going to trim it, but then I ended up just folding it. Yeah. But I just really love having the different lengths and different sizes of papers. For me, when I create my spreads, I like to see one spread from the other and just seeing those little bits and pieces poking through. It just adds a sense of kind of flow to my journals. now that all my signatures are created, I just want to go into the cover a little bit. I think my camera had stopped recording as I was gathering my signatures, but you'll get a full flip through, so don't worry about that. But I'm still playing around with my pieces of fabrics, trying to figure out exactly how I want them. You can see here the different bits and pieces, but first off I need to prep the book cover to put the fabrics onto it. So I'm just selecting 2 pieces of 2 pages from a dictionary. It's an Oxford dictionary. I kind of go through and just try and pick pages that no weird words are on, I guess. I mean, like, especially just because none of that is really going to be covered. I want to make sure that I don't just open the journal and then see some weird word that doesn't really make any sense. So I'm just going to be gluing those, well, trimming them and gluing them as I've been doing. This is my 5th journal that I'm doing this. I just really love the simplicity of it, but yet it just, to me, looks really pretty. So I'm going to be doing that. And then I also need to add a piece of fabric to the spine. And I have to make holes. So here I'm showing you I've hand stitched all my different fabrics together. And you can see how I ended up deciding to use that little doily. I thought it would be great to put a ribbon through it and use that as my closure for this journal. And I'm just showing you here, I've made holes all on the outside of the cover. And I'm just showing you here, this is the needle that I use. And typically, I mean, I'll have my mat so that I don't damage my desk, but put the needle through and then I push the book down. That's the easiest way that I found. Of course, having a poking tool would be way better, but I don't have that, so this is how I'm doing it right now. And if you don't have one, you can still make it happen. So I have to make holes for my signatures, as I want my book to be binded before I stitch all of my fabrics onto it first, because I don't want to see the bindings through the fabrics. So I'm just showing you here what it should look like once I stitch everything. Of course, I'm not going to be stitching and binding on camera because I have full processes on how I bind my books, and there are so many tutorials out there that are much better. And with my stitching the book around, to be honest, I do this like whenever I get the chance. So often it's right in the morning before I go to work, and I just don't have time to record, unfortunately. But I'm just showing you here what I'm hoping that the piece of fabric is going to look like on the inside. I just love how this looks, and I'll show you what I end up doing with it, of course. But here I'm planning on kind of folding that doily over. I don't want to trim any of it. I just like that it continues to be within the inside of the book as well. And I was playing around with the idea of how I was going to have that inside page, because I like to have a little library card to talk about this journal, but that will change. So here I've sewn the whole fabric, all the fabrics together and onto the cover, and this is what it looks like. I'm super happy with how it turned out. You can see here just the little details, and the piece of sari ribbon that I picked just matched that lace perfectly. And now this is where I wasn't sure at first if I was going to be gluing everything down or not, but I ended up wanting to glue all the those little dangling bits of lace because it just felt like it was getting in the way. So I'm just tucking in that piece of fabric. I'm also going to add a tiny bit of glue so that it stays secure there, as I didn't stitch at the spine area. And I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do for a pocket. But here I'm showing you, I'm just using that very same glue that I've been using a lot in my projects lately, and just dabbing a tiny bit of it to make sure that that tiny piece of fabric doesn't move, and just using the excess on my finger to secure that side there too. But first I'm gonna put some at the top of the cover so that the flap is just in the one place where the seam is. There's a little bit more fabric, so I knew that I could secure that pretty well right there. And with fabric, I typically spread everything with my fingers a little bit, but here, since I knew that there was quite a thick layer, it was fine. And I'm just tucking the lace in behind the pages there. I don't want to trim anything. So then I was really debating what else I was going to be doing and how I was going to secure it down, but I ended up applying glue behind each of the flowers, and then I glued separately each little circle that is dangling. And you'll just see this process quite sped up because it took me a pretty long time to do that, and I just skipped through some of it here. Alright, so now that that's done, I'm going back to the pocket idea. I really want a place where I can stick that library card into. And I was debating between a couple different pieces of fabrics and papers, but I had this beautiful printable printed on a vellum paper that Angela sent me in the mail, so I decided to use that, and I just used the same glue to glue the edges. And now I have my tea stained library card in it. And here you have that end result. I ended up adding just a few ruffles, but nothing new. I mean, I used the same techniques as I have in the past. And I know that I like to add a lot as I am creating, so I didn't think it was necessary to add a ton of them for now. But here I'm just showing you a flip of every pages, and that's really it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. It was really nice to get to share a little bit more of my process, but also to share a little bit of my journey finding my style and how I started to journal. I hope that perhaps it can encourage you to continue to explore your own style and to try new things, and that you can be a little inspired by my journey. That's it for this video, you guys. I really hope that you have a fantastic day or evening. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would love for you to. Your support means a lot to me. And I will talk to you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.